Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are back to Anne McCaffrey's Pern series. I'm actually only going to do 3 more books because, honestly, I'm somewhat less enchanted with the rest of the series. But we still have 3 more to go, so let's talk about Anne McCaffrey's Dragonsdawn. I cadged the cover actually off of an ebook version mainly because my hardcover copy, its dust jacket vanished years ago, and basically it doesn't have a dust jacket anymore, so all you would get if you were looking at it is beige, and that's not very interesting. I mean, I suppose I could have done the flyleaf interior maps that she has at the start of the book, but doing that is always so much trouble, and that's trouble I don't want to go to. So, Dragonsdawn. The thing about the Dragon Riders of Pern is that you read the Dragon Riders trilogy, and at first it's just like some kind of weird fantasy universe. But gradually, when you reach the White Dragon, that's when you really fundamentally find like there are bits and pieces and smatterings of evidence that these are people who are some kind of lost human colony. But the White Dragon is really where you find the evidence, where you find shuttlecraft that brought people down to the surface, where you find houses made out of some kind of plastic extrusion, and so on and so forth. But Dragonsdawn is one of the things that Anne McCaffrey, and interestingly enough Mercedes Lackey in her Valdemar series, and I suspect many other authors do wind up doing, and that is that she has things that she makes clear happened in the past, and she goes back and tells the story. And it's true that there are a lot of people who sort of are less than enchanted with, films that tell a story that we already know how it goes. Goodness knows those of us who remember Titanic the first time round remember all the people who said, I don't need to see the movie, I know how it ends. The ship sinks. But, there's always that question of, yes, but how did we get there? In the case of Dragonsdawn, what she's telling is a story that we only know, in effect, by implication. We know that people did come from planet Earth and land on Pern and start a colony, but we don't know why they came, we don't know how they came, we don't know how they wound up in this technological state that they are in at that point, where they have much less technology than they did. We don't know any of these hows or whys, and so when she tells this story, you know that at the end of it there have to be dragons, but you don't really know anything else. And so there's a lot of mystery there. There's a lot of we don't actually know the story. And the interesting thing about Dragonsdawn, coming back to this after a few years of not having reread it, because, there's only so many times you can reread books, because there are other books that are also interesting that you haven't yet read. But the thing about Dragonsdawn, coming back to it, is I look at this book, and this is one of those things that I look at, and I feel like there are some intriguing motivations at play behind this, because when this starts, the colony, as it sets out, is a colony that has set out to lose contact with Earth. They stated right from the start, they wrote their charter, they got everything together, and they said, we're going to fly out to this planet, backwoods of nowhere, a planet that takes us 15 years with people in cryosleep for 15 years in order to get there. And we are going to be so far away from Earth that we cannot contact them and they can't contact us. We want to live in a low-tech agrarian society, and we want to leave everything behind. And the interesting thing about this is that I can understand wanting to go someplace new and start a new life and all that sort of thing, but when you consider things like that Emily Bull leaves behind children, not young children, she's got adult children, she's in like her 50s or 60s at the start of this book. She's not a young woman, her children are all grown up, but none of them want to come with her, that she's left her children behind, her offspring, any potential grandchildren she has, she will never see them, because she's decided she wants to run away to this agrarian society. You have, all of these people who have made this decision that they will never return to Earth. They're never going to see their extended families. They're never going to, go to any of the places on Earth that we think of as important, or tourist destinations, or important cultural things. All of that is going to be left behind, and it's a really, really interesting choice, because on the one hand, I can understand somebody saying the entire Earth has been taken over by this technological palaver, we don't have any way to, find a retreat. I get that. But to put yourself in a situation, as they wind up being in this, where you have some kind of unholy emergency and you do not have anyone to call on, you don't have any backup, you don't have any way of getting that help, and also as you downgrade to an agrarian society, you lose all of the wonders of technology that we get used to in terms of transportation, because they said, well, we'll have our flying sleds for 50 years. Yes, and then after 50 years you don't have those sleds anymore, and 50 years from now your grandchildren are going to wish they weren't living there because they don't have the flying sled that they can use to get people to places in an emergency or back in an emergency. You don't have the same medical technology, so things that you could have done 50 years ago to save lives are no longer an option. All of this, it's very, very striking to me, this stark choice that has been made. And so it's a very, very interesting out-and-out initial motivation. And the thing is that equally interesting is the case of Avril Betra, who is one of the, I suppose you could call her a villain in this book, because she is a selfish, self-centered person who gamed the system, because Anne McCaffrey's a big believer in psychology and psychological testing and psychiatry and, therapy and like dealing with people's mental health issues. Like, this is a really, really big thing for her. It's a huge theme in her books, and anybody who is pro the notion of mental health being just like treated as a front and center, central, regular health thing, this is a super heavy duty undertone in like nearly every single one of her books that I read. Like, all of them have people talking about going to therapy when they need it, and having people do psychological analyses to help people find more fulfilling ways in life, and to make sure that people don't become weird and antisocial and all kinds of, like, she is super, super into that idea. So, hey, if that's your bag, I can recommend it at least on those terms. So Avril Betra, though, is clever and possibly sociopathic, and has learned how to game the system, because you have these psychological tests, but if you know the tests well, you can know what are the right answers to give to get the outcome, to get people believing what they want of you based on the test. So she games the system because she decides that she wants to join this colony and make herself the queen of the colony. It seems pretty evident that her initial thought was that she would have the opportunity to start afresh in this new world and claw her way to the top of the social order. But when she finds her plans to claw her way to the top of the social order stymied, she starts making plans to find her way back to quote-unquote civilization. Which causes a heck of a lot of tragedy which causes some serious tragedy along the way, because she's just not a very nice person. The big thing with Dragonsdawn is, though, that, they have 8 wonderful, blissful years, and then after that 8 years, that's when the first threadfall happens. That's when the first evil fungus falls out of the sky and eats everything in its path. They lose a lot of people. There are, you have the stories of the encampments where the only survivors are 2 babies who got stuffed into a metal cabinet at the last minute. You have, stories of people seeing their several young people who are out in hunting parties, and one of them being unable to do anything while he just watches his hunting partner literally dissolve in front of him. And it causes a lot of cracks in the colony because, of course, a lot of them are saying we should call for help. But the thing is, what is pointed out repeatedly in the book is even if they call for help, it will be literally 10 years before any help arrives. 10 years. In 10 years, they could all be dead from the scary fungus falling from the sky that eats everything in its path. And that's why they wind up bioengineering the dragons. But this is such an interesting thing because the motivations for so many of these people are just something that you wonder about. You don't wonder about some of them because some of them you can see them, they just want to get away and leave their pasts behind, but others, you look at them and you wonder, why would they choose this? Why would they choose to do this? Because it's not just a matter of yourself. You set up this colony and you've got all of your children, and your children are never going to have those opportunities you did. Your children will never be able to go to a top flight university. Your children will never be able to see all of the great museums of the world. Your children will never get to be pilots, will never get to be all of these things that you have made this choice. And it's irrevocable choices are such a dangerous thing, and I am fascinated just sort of on a purely intellectual level by these fictional characters who make this choice. But anyways, what this does, though, is this fills in all of those gaps that we have from those first 3 books. Those first 3 books that really, really discuss, that really center on the question of where all these people came from and looking back onto their history. And it's just a really, really, it's a really good book. It's got excitement and adventure and tear-jerking moments and romance and, children and the whole coming-of-age stick, if that's what you care about. I hate that turn of phrase so much. But I really, really enjoy this one, especially as we watch as they struggle collectively to get through this. But I am running up on my time limit, so I think I'm pretty much going to stop there. This is one of the best books out of the series, in my opinion. So, if you're going to read any of them, this is the most science fiction-y of the whole series. And I think that is everything, so I guess I will see you all next week.